What happens when you find a treasure so dangerous that touching it drives people insane? A vault containing artifacts from a civilization that should not exist, and a government desperate to erase every trace of its discovery. This is not fiction. This actually happened. In 1922, a group of explorers broke into a sealed chamber in a forgotten valley. What they found inside changed their lives forever. Within 2 weeks, one man vanished. Another went mad. Two died with terror frozen on their faces. The government confiscated everything, blocked the site, and told the world it never existed. But the evidence says otherwise. Today we're uncovering the truth about one of history's most suppressed archaeological discoveries. Deep in an isolated valley, far from any modern civilization, there existed a cave that locals had avoided for generations. This was not ordinary superstition. The warnings passed down through families were specific and disturbing. People reported feeling sick when they got too close. The air felt thick, wrong, like it pushed against your chest when you breathed. At night, the ground would vibrate with no explanation. No earthquake, no machinery, just a low-frequency hum that you could feel in your bones. Some claimed to see lights moving inside the darkness of the cave entrance. Pale blue glows that would appear and disappear. But here's the strange part. No one lived in that valley. No campfires, no travelers, no explanation for those lights. The locals built their homes facing away from the valley. They never went there to hunt, to gather water, or for any reason. When asked why, they would simply say the place was wrong. For centuries, the cave entrance remained sealed with massive stones. Not the kind of seal you see in ancient tombs. This was different. The stones were placed deliberately, with clay and some kind of resin filling every crack. Someone had gone to enormous effort to make sure nothing got in or out. The seal showed signs of extreme age, weathered by wind and rain for what appeared to be hundreds, possibly thousands of years. But in 1922, everything changed. A small expedition team heard rumors about the sealed cave. These were not archaeologists working for universities or museums. They were private explorers, treasure hunters motivated by stories of unimaginable wealth hidden inside. The local guides refused to take them to the site. They had to find it themselves using old maps and descriptions from people who had seen it from a distance. When the expedition finally located the cave, they spent 3 days breaking through the seal. The stones were massive, requiring tools and leverage. As they worked, several members of the team reported feeling dizzy and nauseous. One man claimed his ears were ringing constantly. Another said he kept seeing movement in his peripheral vision, but when he turned to look, nothing was there. They should have recognized these as warnings. They didn't. The moment the seal broke, something changed. The air that rushed out from inside the cave was cold, far colder than it should have been. One expedition member described it as breathing in winter. The temperature difference made no logical sense. Outside, it was warm. The surrounding area showed no geological features that would explain an underground cold pocket. They lit their lanterns and stepped inside. The entrance tunnel was carved smooth, not naturally formed. Tool marks were visible on the walls, but they didn't match any known ancient technique. The cuts were too precise, too uniform. Modern geologists who later examined photographs said the level of precision would have been impossible without advanced machinery. After approximately 50 meters, the tunnel opened into a chamber. And this is where everything stopped making sense. The chamber was enormous. The ceiling stretched up into darkness beyond the reach of their lights. The walls were covered in carvings. But these weren't hieroglyphics or any recognized ancient script. The symbols were geometric, mathematical, complex arrangements of lines and curves that hurt to look at for too long. Several expedition members reported that staring at the carvings made them feel disoriented, like the symbols were moving even though they remained perfectly still on the stone. Among the carvings were depictions of creatures, not animals, not humans, something else. Figures with elongated limbs and proportions that didn't match any known species. Some appeared to have extra joints in their arms and legs. Others had facial structures that were almost human, but wrong in subtle, disturbing ways. The ears were positioned too high, the eyes were slightly too large and set at angles that created an unsettling asymmetry. But the carvings weren't what dominated the chamber. In the center of the room stood stone pillars arranged in a perfect circle, 7 pillars, each approximately 3 meters tall. The pillars were made from a type of stone that didn't exist anywhere in the surrounding region. Geological analysis later confirmed this. The nearest source for that particular rock formation was over 800 kilometers away. How did it get there? How did ancient people transport stones weighing several tons across that distance? The pillars themselves were carved with a level of detail that seemed excessive, almost obsessive. Every surface was covered in tiny markings, not decorative patterns. They looked like data, like information being recorded, numbers, perhaps, or coordinates, or instructions for something the expedition team couldn't begin to understand. Between the pillars sat a massive stone chest. This was clearly the focal point of the entire chamber. The chest was approximately 2 meters long, 1 meter wide, and carved from a single piece of dark stone. But covering the entire surface of the chest were crystals. Green crystals that grew directly from the stone itself, or appeared to be embedded so deeply that they might as well have been part of the original material. Here's the detail that terrified them. The crystals were glowing, faintly but unmistakably, a soft green luminescence that pulsed slowly, like breathing. There was no chemical explanation readily available. The expedition brought samples back, and later analysis showed the crystals contained compounds that shouldn't have been stable in nature. They required conditions that didn't exist in that cave or anywhere on the surface of the earth. The temperature in the chamber had dropped even further. Their breath came out in clouds. The lanterns began to flicker. Not from lack of oil or wind, they flickered in unison all at the same time, as if responding to something in the environment. One of the men, a veteran explorer named Richard Halloway, reported that he started hearing sounds, not echoes from their movements, new sounds, whispers coming from the walls. He said the whispers sounded like words, but in a language he had never encountered. Others in the group heard nothing. But Halloway became increasingly agitated, insisting the whispers were getting louder. They should have left then. Any rational person would have recognized that something was deeply wrong with that place. But the chest was right there. After days of breaking through the seal, after traveling so far, the promise of what might be inside was too powerful. 4 men worked together to pry open the lid of the chest. The stone was heavy, and the lid resisted their efforts. When it finally shifted, a sound echoed through the chamber. Not from the chest, from somewhere deeper in the cave system. A low, resonant tone that vibrated through the floor and up into their legs. The sound lasted for approximately 15 seconds before fading away. Inside the chest were rows of golden plates, not coins, not jewelry. Rectangular plates approximately 30 centimeters long and 20 centimeters wide. Each plate was covered in engravings. Detailed maps showing coastlines that didn't match any known geography. Diagrams of mechanical devices that looked impossibly complex. Star charts showing constellations, but with extra stars in positions where nothing exists in our night sky. And scattered throughout were those same disturbing geometric symbols from the walls. The most unsettling detail? Some of the plates showed what appeared to be instructions. step-by-step diagrams for building something. The team couldn't determine what, but the diagrams showed precision engineering, mathematical calculations, and a level of technical knowledge that contradicted everything historians knew about ancient civilizations. Richard Halloway picked up one of the plates. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he dropped it suddenly, stumbling backward. He said touching the plate felt like electricity. Not painful, but wrong. Like the metal was vibrating at a frequency he could feel inside his head. The other men picked up plates as well. Some reported similar sensations. Others felt nothing unusual. They loaded as many plates as they could carry into their packs and prepared to leave. That night, camped outside the valley, Richard Halloway didn't sleep. He sat by the fire, staring at nothing, occasionally muttering to himself. When asked what was wrong, he said he couldn't stop seeing the symbols. Every time he closed his eyes, they appeared behind his eyelids, bright and clear, as if someone was projecting them directly into his mind. Over the next 2 weeks, the expedition fell apart completely. Thomas Brennan, the team's navigator, disappeared on the 4th day. They found his tent empty, his belongings still inside, but he was gone. No footprints led away from the camp, no signs of struggle. He simply vanished. Search parties found nothing. Richard Halloway's condition deteriorated rapidly. He became convinced the symbols were communicating with him. He filled notebooks with drawings, trying to decode what he called the message. His handwriting became increasingly erratic. His final entries were incomprehensible, just the same geometric shapes drawn over and over, page after page. 2 other members of the expedition, Marcus Chen and David Olmsted, died within days of each other. Both deaths were officially ruled as heart attacks, but witnesses described something disturbing. Both men were found with expressions of absolute terror on their faces, eyes wide open, mouths frozen in silent screams. That's not typical of heart attack victims. The government moved in quickly. Officials confiscated all the artifacts, all the photographs, all the notes and journals. They sealed the cave again, this time with concrete and metal barriers. Armed guards were posted. The surrounding valley was declared a restricted zone. Any mention of the discovery in newspapers was suppressed. The families of the expedition members were paid substantial sums of money and required to sign agreements never to speak about what happened. But here's what they couldn't completely erase. Geologists who examined the chamber before it was sealed submitted reports. Those reports stated that the chamber was carved approximately 7,000 to 9,000 years ago. That predates the earliest known advanced civilizations by thousands of years. The precision of the carving, the transportation of stones from hundreds of kilometers away, the crystal compounds that shouldn't exist naturally. None of it fits with what we think we know about ancient human capabilities. So we're left with questions that no one wants to answer. Who built that vault? What was the purpose of the golden plates? Why did they affect the minds of people who touched them? What were the glowing crystals, and why were they growing from the stone? And most disturbing of all, why did the government work so hard to erase every trace of the discovery? Maybe the artifacts represented technology that contradicted established historical narratives. Maybe the crystals posed some kind of biological or psychological hazard that officials couldn't explain. Maybe the symbols contained information that was considered dangerous for public knowledge. Or maybe the truth is simpler and more terrifying. Maybe that vault was sealed thousands of years ago for a reason. Maybe the ancient people who built it knew something we don't. And maybe breaking that seal released something that was never meant to be disturbed. The valley is still there. The cave is still sealed. And somewhere in a government warehouse, those golden plates still exist, locked away where no one can study them. If you want to see more mysteries that governments tried to hide, hit subscribe right now.